Rachel Lane is the founder of Aged Care Gurus and the co author of Downsizing Made Simple, a book which explains the do's and don'ts of downsizing. Put simply, she's the perfect person to talk to for a show like this, and she joins me now. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Kate.
Rachel, there's so much to consider when you think about the concept of downsizing, but I guess I want to start by asking you, how do you know when it might be the right time to downsize?
Yeah, I think when you start serving your house and your house stops serving you, um,
Ah,
I think when it doesn't match your lifestyle anymore. And that lifestyle, people downsize for a whole bunch of reasons. Some people downsize because they want a house that they can lock and leave and travel. Some people downsize just because they want a more low maintenance home. Some people downsize because they want to release some of the equity in their home to invest or spend. And some people downsize because they really can't stay living in their current home safely because they
mm,
might need support or care to continue living independently. So, but I think when you boil all of those motivations down, it comes down to one thing, and that is that their home no longer supports the lifestyle that they're wanting to live.
I like the way you framed that because it kind of frames it in a positive way as well. Like it doesn't support the lifestyle they want to live. They want to do something different, maybe travel, clean less, have less of a yard to look after, all of that kind of thing. When people have gotten to the point where they think, yes, this is the right time for me to downsize, what are some things they might want to consider?
Well, I mean, obviously, where you live is going to be the biggest consideration. And we know that where you live is about so much more than accommodation. It has huge implications for your social networks, for your health, for your happiness. So it really is a big decision and one that needs a lot of research.
Mm,
The great thing about downsizing is that there's literally a smorgasbord of options.
hmm
So, there's kind of, if you like, the in inverted commas, traditional downsizing options of downsizing to a strata apartment or townhouse or a retirement village or land lease community. But then there's other things like granny flats, build to rent, renting in its own right, collaborative housing. There's literally a smorgasbord. Well, there's a whole book in all of the different options that people have got and all of the other kind of financial and legal ramifications of that people need to think about.
Mm. How can someone go about making that decision about where they should downsize to? Because it can be so overwhelming. What I'm wondering if there are some resources or if you've got any advice on the people that people should have around them when they're making this decision to make sure they get the right help.
Yeah, I think so. Our website, so the book has its own website, which is just downsizingmadesimple.com.au. And that has got so many resources from calculators to checklists to exercises. And actually the first exercise we start with is why.
Mm.
So understand the things that that your current house gives you that you don't want. So what are you moving from? Understand the things that your current house gives you that you want to keep, and understand what do you want to move to. So what are your pull factors? What are you looking for in your new home that's going to motivate you to go through this exercise? Because this is not a 5-minute or $5 exercise. This is something that requires a lot of energy
Mm.
and in some cases a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can also be quite an emotional experience for people as well. Packing up the family home is huge. What would you say to someone who finds themselves, quite stressed or anxious about making these kinds of decisions?
Yeah, I think having having somewhere to go that you're excited about definitely helps. You need that motivation because, for different people, like sometimes it's the linen closet, sometimes it's the garden shed, whatever it might be. Sometimes people just open that door and go, I can't deal with that.
Mm,
But having something that you're really looking forward to and starting that new chapter can give you the motivation to work your way through it. The number one tip I would say is that you just shouldn't try and go through that what they call decluttering process in one day. You just and just start with one room. And if you can't face the whole room, let's say it's the kitchen, just start with one drawer. And think about what are the things that are actually going to serve you in the new chapter of life. What do you really need?
You're listening to ABC Radio Canberra, and my guest this morning is Rachel Lane. She's the co-author of Downsizing Made Simple, and we're talking about downsizing, what you should do, what you should think about. And Rachel, I'm wondering how you should weigh up decisions like lifestyle and location when it comes to making a decision about where you're going to downsize to. Is it personal preference, or would you place more weight on one over the other?
No, you definitely need to think about things like, do you want to be close to an airport because you're expecting to have a lot of international visitors, or you're expecting to travel yourself a lot internationally or even interstate? How many bedrooms do you need to cater to the lifestyle you're going to live? So do you need just 2 bedrooms, or do you need a 3rd bedroom because the grandkids are going to come and stay? Or perhaps you might need that 2nd bedroom because your husband snores, Might be all sorts of, but you do need to think about that. And you need to think about as well, let's say you're thinking about downsizing into a retirement village. Typically, retirement villages have a community hub, which is kind of the hive of all the activity. It's where there's, swimming pools and tennis courts, or pickleball courts as they are now. And there can be a lot of social gatherings, and as a result, a lot of noise around that area. So think about, do you want your home to be close to that? Because that can be super convenient because you can duck over there multiple times a day. Or would you prefer to be further away from that so that you don't get the noise, but you can get there under your own steam when you want to?
That's a good point. And it makes me wonder, you mentioned earlier the smorgasbord of options. When it comes to downsizing, you can go into a villa or a townhouse or a retirement home. Would you suggest, Rachel, people kind of look at all of those options and then make an informed decision, or just kind of go with their heart if they really want to live in a townhouse that's close to, some local shops and a cafe, to just, fully invest in that? What would you suggest as a way to kind of distill all of the options?
I think, some things I think people just do have that kind of gut reaction of absolutely not. So sometimes when I'm talking about granny flat arrangements with kids, for example, people will just look at me like, absolutely not. That is not for me. So there's no point in investigating options where you have that absolutely not, that is not for me. But it is definitely worth doing your research. A lot of people will choose to downsize close to where they currently live because they like the connection to things within the community, whether it's, a social club, the shops, medical facilities, whatever it might be. But exploring different accommodation options, I'm a big believer that the more research you do, the better the decision you're going to make at the end of the For exploring retirement communities, one of the tips that I give to people is do not choose it based on location. So it may be at the end of the street, from where you currently live, but that doesn't mean it's going to be the right village for you. You need to kind of get a feel for what the vibe is of that village and whether or not they're your kind of people. So easy ways to do that are to go along and grab a copy of the social calendar. There's normally more things than any single human could possibly do in a week or a month in that social calendar. And just circle the things that if you were to move there that you would be interested in, and then have a chat to the village manager and say, hey, could I come along to the wine and cheese appreciation night, or could I come along to the yoga class, or whatever it might be that interests you. You can actually start to get involved in that community before you decide whether or not you're going to buy.
You're giving us so much good advice. I'm sure people at home are scribbling down all of this information. But I wonder if you perhaps have some advice for people who are in the supporting role. supporting someone to downsize, maybe their parents, maybe their grandparents, an elderly relative. What would you say to someone who is a little bit more removed from the situation but very involved in the situation as well?
Yeah, I think I'd probably say two things there. It's very important to have a with you rather than to you approach when you're going through that with someone else, normally a parent, and understand that ultimately this is their decision and there is no bigger decision than where you live. So while it may not be what you would choose for them, it is important that they can exercise that choice for themselves. The other thing I would say is that make sure that you crunch the numbers. So sometimes, one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're downsizing is they just look at the purchase price and they forget about, well, what is it going to cost you ongoing and how much are you going to get back and how soon when you leave. So one of the exercises we give people is called ingoing, ongoing, outgoing. And it really helps to break the transaction down and stop those rules of thumb like, oh, that one's 500,000, that one's 600,000, the first one's cheaper, because you're only looking at one part of the transaction. You've got to look at what does it cost while you live there and how much do you get back when you leave. The other important thing is that when you downsize, you can downsize your pension. So make sure you understand what the impact is on your pension. And sometimes a good strategy for managing that can be what I call supersize your downsize. So it might actually be more affordable to go for the 3-bedroom apartment than the 2-bedroom apartment because of the implications that can have for your pension entitlement.
That's really good advice as well. If people are seeking more advice, I know you mentioned a website before. I'm wondering if you could mention that website again and any other resources you think could help people find more information and make some decisions around downsizing.
Yeah, sure. So the book is called Downsizing Made Simple and the website is the same name, just .com.au. The other resource that I would encourage people to get is what's called a Village Guru report. That's a bit of software that we created a couple of years ago that crunches all of those numbers that I was talking about what is it going to cost up front while you live there and when you leave. And it can also provide an estimate of your age pension, rent assistance and home care package fees and funding, which is great information to have, particularly if you're trying to compare different options. Like it might be different options within the same community, it might be different properties, it could be anything, but you can look at 3 different options side by side with one of those reports.
It sounds like a fantastic software system and really important when you can get so overwhelmed with information when you're thinking about downsizing. Rachel, I'm wondering before I let you go, what do you think does downsizing look like when it's done well?
Oh, it looks like a new lease on life. The most common regret, and even, my grandmother said the same thing when she downsized, the most common regret is not making the move sooner because they have a sense of freedom. They have money that they've released from the equity in their home that they can invest or spend. They don't have to worry about maintaining, a big house anymore. Typically, particularly those who downsize into a retirement community, they have a whole new circle of friends that they get involved in all sorts of different activities and outings with. It really is something that can have huge ramifications, not just financially. I mean, obviously, I'm a finance person. I'm going to talk about the money side of it. But the actual bang for your buck side of it is the health and happiness benefits that people get from it.
Indeed. Rachel, thank you so much for running us through some of the aspects of downsizing to consider and for sharing so much advice with us as well this morning. I appreciate it very much.
No problem. You're welcome.
That was Rachel Lane, the co-author of Downsizing Made Simple.